What if the first spark of faith did not begin in temples, chants, or sacred books, but in a desolate plain, where an early human stopped for the first time to wonder about something he could not see or touch? Imagine standing beside a being who lived 3.9 million years ago, long before religions existed, long before names like gods or spirits were ever spoken. What would make a creature with a brain so much smaller than ours look at the sky, the bones of a fallen companion, or the mysterious darkness of night and feel that there was something more? This is the question that opens a doorway to one of the most profound mysteries of human evolution, the birth of spirituality itself. Before rituals, before myths, before tribes created meaning, there was a simple and quiet moment of awareness, a moment when fear, curiosity, and survival intertwined in ways that shaped everything that came after. You can almost picture that early ancestor pausing, sensing a presence in the wind or a message in the patterns of nature. Was it instinct, imagination, or the earliest form of symbolic thought? That uncertainty, that tension between the visible world and the invisible one, is the birthplace of what we now call faith. And this fragile seed, emerging in an environment filled with danger, hunger, and the constant threat of extinction, became one of the driving forces that shaped human identity across millions of years. As we look back at these ancient landscapes and the minds that walked through them, the first traces of spiritual behavior appear not as structured beliefs, but as raw, emotional reactions to the mysteries of existence. The early human did not know what he was sensing, but he knew it had weight, meaning, and power. You have probably felt something similar at some point in your life, a strange moment when logic seems too small to explain what you are experiencing. Have you ever gone through that? If something inside you is saying yes, stay close, because the path we are about to follow may shift the way you understand our origins. Before we move forward, tell me in the comments if you have ever wondered how far back in time faith truly goes, and let me know your thoughts on these first sparks of human spirituality. Do not forget to like the video and check if you are already subscribed to the channel, because understanding this kind of content makes a difference when exploring our deepest origins. What you will uncover next might surprise you, as we trace the fragile beginnings of the practices that would eventually shape the minds of early humans and guide the evolution of our species in ways they could never have imagined. As we continue tracing the earliest roots of spiritual awareness, imagine stepping even closer to those distant ancestors whose minds were still forming the foundations of symbolic thought. Among the first traces of this emerging consciousness are found in creatures like Australopithecines, whose world was shaped by instinct but occasionally stirred by something deeper. They lived in small groups, constantly navigating fear, scarcity, and the unpredictable forces of nature. Yet within this harsh environment, there were subtle behaviors that hint at an awakening, a kind of reverence that did not yet have a name. When these early beings paused before a storm, followed the flight of scavenger birds, or hesitated at the remains of one of their own, they were doing more than reacting to survival cues. They were beginning to sense patterns that extended beyond immediate danger. Their brains, though smaller, were not empty. They carried the seeds of imagination, curiosity, and emotional memory. These traits created moments of stillness, where an Australopithecine might tilt its head toward a sound that held no direct threat, or return repeatedly to a place that evoked tension or a strange familiarity. It is in these simple acts that we glimpse the earliest shadows of spiritual behavior. Not rituals, not worship, but recognition. A recognition that the world held layers they could not fully grasp, yet felt compelled to acknowledge. Some scientists believe these moments arose from the same neural pathways that govern attachment and social bonding, suggesting that the spark of spirituality may have emerged from the same internal mechanisms that made them care for each other. Picture an early ancestor pausing over the body of a fallen group member. There was no burial, no symbolic gesture, yet the hesitation itself carried meaning. The awareness of loss, of absence, created a question they had no words to express. It is in these moments that the first emotional bridges between life and the unknown were built. These creatures did not contemplate an afterlife, but they reacted to death differently from other animals, lingering longer, displaying quiet behaviors that hinted at the earliest form of reverence. And through this fragile emotional framework, curiosity began to stretch beyond the material world. As their groups grew slightly more complex, these small sparks of awareness may have played a role in cohesion. A creature that sensed patterns in nature or hesitated before certain places could influence the movements of the entire group. This suggests that the earliest spiritual instincts may have contributed not only to individual perception, but to collective survival. The mind of an Australopithecine, shaped by fear and instinct, was quietly evolving towards something far more profound, setting in motion the beginnings of symbolic thinking that would eventually guide the path of early humanity in ways they could not foresee, drawing them step by step toward the rituals that would one day define their identity. As those early sparks of awareness slowly expanded in the minds of our distant ancestors, something even more intriguing began to take shape. The first primitive rituals did not begin as elaborate ceremonies or carefully orchestrated gestures. They emerged, almost accidentally, born from repetition, emotion, and the instinctive need to communicate with forces they could not fully understand. Imagine an early human standing on a ridge, watching lightning tear across the sky. The raw power of nature stirred fear, but also fascination. A single gesture, perhaps raising an arm or letting out a particular sound, might have been repeated the next time the storm returned. Not because they believed it controlled anything, but because it created a sense of connection, a way to respond to what overwhelmed them. These gestures, once repeated, triggered emotional memory. Over time, small actions became patterns. A certain posture when facing the wind, a specific sound when gathering near a water source, a rhythmic tapping on stones when danger felt near. These early proto-rituals were not meant to invoke spirits, yet they became the seeds of symbolic expression. The consistency of repetition gave meaning where language did not exist. Even without knowing why, early humans were driven to reenact gestures that made them feel aligned with the rhythms of their environment. This behavior, shaped by emotion and instinct, slowly carved the first channels through which spirituality could grow. Consider a group gathering near the remains of a hunted animal. Before eating, they might touch the carcass in the same way, or arrange themselves around it following a familiar sequence. Small, seemingly insignificant acts that resembled the earliest forms of ceremony. These patterns strengthened social cohesion, reducing anxiety and reinforcing a shared experience. What began as instinct gradually transformed into intention. With each repetition, these gestures gained symbolic weight, serving not only as responses to the environment, but as a bridge between the tangible and the intangible. Ritualistic sounds followed a similar path. Early vocalizations, once used solely for warning or bonding, began to adopt new tones in moments of tension or awe. A deep hum when entering a dark cave, a rhythmic chant when moving as a group at night. These sounds shaped the emotional atmosphere of the moment, imprinting meaning into the minds of those who heard them. Even without language, rhythm became a carrier of shared emotion, connecting individuals to something larger than themselves. Through these repeated gestures, rhythms, and instinctive sequences, our ancestors were slowly crafting the first symbolic systems. They had no concept of gods or sacredness, yet their actions already mirrored the structure of what would later become spiritual practice. What began as an echo of instinct was evolving into the earliest architecture of belief, preparing the ground for the more complex meanings that would soon emerge as their awareness deepened and their relationship with death, nature, and the unseen grew even more profound. As these early gestures and sounds began to shape a sense of connection with the world, something even more transformative started to unfold when our ancestors confronted the one experience that no creature could ignore: death. A fallen group member was not simply an absence. It altered the emotional landscape of the entire group. The stillness of the body, the silence that replaced familiar movement, created a tension they could not explain. Unlike other animals that often moved on quickly, early humans lingered. They circled the body, hesitated, and sometimes returned repeatedly to the same spot, long after the death occurred. This hesitation marked the beginning of a profound shift in perception, a moment when the boundary between the tangible and intangible felt disturbingly fragile. In these moments, the earliest forms of reverence began to appear, not as purposeful ritual, but as an emotional and instinctive response to loss. The body of the dead was often positioned or touched in ways that suggested more than simple curiosity. Some individuals may have placed stones or branches near the remains, not because they understood symbolic action, but because arranging the environment eased the tension they felt. A pattern of returning to the site transformed these simple acts into something that carried emotional weight. Each visit reinforced the idea that death demanded attention, that it had a presence that extended beyond the moment of dying. As groups observed these reactions, a shared sensitivity toward death began to form. The place where a body lay became a point of collective memory. Even without language, the group communicated through posture, gaze, and repeated gestures that this space held significance. This emotional choreography shaped the earliest concepts of meaning surrounding death. Fear blended with fascination, and the awareness of finality opened a new dimension of thought. The idea that something persisted after life, that the dead occupied a space between presence and absence, emerged quietly, long before burial practices or afterlife beliefs were formed. These early responses played a crucial role in strengthening social bonds. The group that acknowledged death together also reassured each other of safety and continuity. In a world filled with predators and dangers, staying near the dead for a moment may have been risky, yet it signaled an instinct to preserve unity. Through this instinctive reverence, the emotional foundation of future spiritual beliefs was being laid, one hesitant gesture at a time, shaping how early humans interpreted the cycle of life and the mysterious threshold they could not cross but could not ignore. Before we move on, tell me in the comments what you think might have triggered this early sense of reverence toward the dead. Which emotion do you believe came first? Fear, curiosity, or something deeper that these early humans could not name? Your perspective helps expand this exploration while we continue unfolding how these ancient responses guided humanity toward the rituals that would soon emerge. As early humans continued shaping meaning around death and the unseen, another force rose at the center of their evolving awareness: fire. Its appearance transformed not only their survival, but their emotional and symbolic imagination. Before fire became a tool, it was a presence, unpredictable and alive. Imagine an early ancestor watching flames devour a fallen tree, the crackling sound echoing like a foreign language, the shifting light creating patterns across the ground. Fire was both terrifying and mesmerizing, a force that consumed, protected, illuminated, and warmed. In a world where nature dictated every aspect of existence, the flame stood apart as something that behaved almost like a living entity. When groups first approached naturally occurring fires, their reactions revealed the beginnings of symbolic perception. They were drawn close, then driven back, learning its temperament through trial and error. The flame responded visibly to movement and wind, flickering in ways that seemed reactive, almost aware. This dynamic interaction stirred an emotional response that extended beyond fear. Fire became a focal point for gathering, a source of comfort that redefined the night. Sitting around it, early humans experienced a new kind of shared attention, where the shifting light created an atmosphere that encouraged silence, observation, and connection. This environment allowed imagination to grow, giving space for the mind to wander into territories beyond the immediate moment. Once they learned to preserve embers and eventually create fire themselves, the relationship deepened. The act of producing flame carried a sense of mastery, but also responsibility. Those who could maintain it gained a unique status within the group, becoming keepers of something that felt larger than themselves. Fire was no longer simply a phenomenon. It became a companion. The heat, the light, the swirling smoke, all contributed to a sensory experience that shaped emotional memory. In the flicker of flames, shadows danced along cave walls, giving shape to figures that existed only in their minds. These visual illusions fed the early seeds of storytelling and symbolic thinking, reinforcing the connection between the visible and the invisible. Fire also redefined their understanding of night. Darkness, once filled with predators and uncertainty, now held a center of safety. Gathered around the flame, early humans could look outward into the night while remaining anchored to a source of warmth and stability. This contrast between light and darkness created some of the earliest metaphors in human consciousness long before language existed. Fire separated them from the world of instinct, allowing moments of shared reflection where the mind could explore questions it had never accessed before. Through this profound interaction, the flame became more than a tool. It became a silent partner in the formation of spirituality, guiding early humans toward a deeper awareness of forces that shaped their existence and preparing them for the symbolic worlds they would soon begin to create as their understanding of nature continued to expand. As fire reshaped the emotional landscape of early humans, the world around them gained new layers of meaning. Mountains, rivers, storms, caves, and vast stretches of sky were no longer just elements of the environment. They became powerful presences that stirred the imagination in ways their ancestors had never experienced. Nature, immense and unpredictable, was interpreted not simply as a setting but as a force that interacted with them. The howl of wind through narrow rock passages, the sudden roar of thunder, the echo inside a cavern, all created sensations that exceeded the boundaries of instinct. These moments pressed upon the senses, urging early humans to respond emotionally rather than merely react for survival. Imagine an ancestor standing at the base of a towering cliff, watching shadows crawl down its surface as the sun shifted. The cliff remained still, yet its presence felt active, as though it held memory or intention. The same occurred with rivers that changed shape and sound depending on the season, or storms that arrived with violent energy and vanished without warning. These fluctuations created patterns that early humans attempted to interpret. The world seemed to speak in rhythms, and the inability to fully understand those rhythms gave rise to a sense of mystery that lingered long after an event ended. Caves played a particularly significant role. Entering a dark cavern was like crossing into another realm. The temperature dropped, the air thickened, and sounds transformed into echoes that returned distorted versions of their own voices. These sensory shifts made caves feel like thresholds between the known and the unknown. Being inside one could evoke both safety and danger, familiarity and strangeness. Early humans often returned to these spaces despite their fears, drawn by the way the environment shaped their perception. Here, imagination could stretch freely, forming images from shadows and symbols from irregularities in the rock walls. Even open landscapes carried emotional weight. A sudden gust of wind on an empty plain, or the distant call of an animal they could not see, stirred curiosity and unease. These sensations made early humans more attentive, encouraging them to interpret environmental cues as meaningful. Over time, repeated experiences transformed natural elements into recurring emotional anchors. A mountain was not simply a mass of stone. It was stability. The sky was not just emptiness, it was possibility. The earth beneath their feet, the storms above their heads, the forests that both sheltered and threatened them. Each held qualities that felt larger than their physical forms. These perceptions, shaped by emotion, reinforced the idea that nature possessed a kind of presence beyond its physical reality. Early humans began to sense patterns, not because they sought spiritual explanations, but because their minds were evolving to recognize meaning in the forces that shaped their existence. Through this growing relationship with the natural world, they were unknowingly preparing the foundation for symbols, stories, and beliefs that would soon transform their understanding of themselves and the unseen forces they felt moving around them. As early humans continued to interpret the world around them, their minds began shaping something even more remarkable: the ability to create inner images that held meaning beyond immediate experience. Symbolic imagination did not arise suddenly. It grew slowly, fed by emotion, memory, and the emerging awareness of patterns in nature. A shadow on a cave wall, once just a shape, started to resemble an animal or a figure. A cluster of stones might evoke the outline of something familiar. These interpretations were not deliberate creations, but natural extensions of a brain learning to form connections that reached beyond the visible world. This shift marked a turning point, allowing early humans to interact not only with their environment, but with the unseen realities their own minds generated. In the flickering light of fire, shapes moved and transformed, giving life to forms that existed only in thought. These illusions encouraged the mind to search for meaning, prompting early humans to attach emotional significance to what they imagined. Over time, these mental images became more stable, developing into symbols that represented concepts rather than physical objects. A mark on the ground might signify danger. A gesture might communicate reassurance. A repeated pattern in the sand might stand for an event they wished to remember. These symbolic seeds were the earliest building blocks of myth and belief, long before spoken language gave structure to their thoughts. This new capacity also influenced their perception of themselves. As imagination expanded, so did the awareness of inner experience. Fear, longing, curiosity, and awe began to blend with scenes constructed by the mind, creating a deeper emotional landscape. Early humans no longer reacted to the world solely through instinct. They interpreted it through meaning shaped by memory and thought. This transformation allowed them to see the world not only as it was, but as it could be, and this dual perspective made the invisible feel increasingly real. In these early symbolic traces, the foundations of spiritual belief took form, shaped not by doctrine, but by the profound need to understand forces that exceeded physical reality. Groups that shared these symbols grew closer. A gesture recognized by all members created unity during moments of danger or uncertainty. A repeated mark could remind the group of a place worth returning to. Even without spoken language, symbols allowed early humans to feel connected through shared interpretations of their environment. What began as imagination soon became collective meaning, strengthening the bond between individuals and elevating their sense of belonging to something greater than themselves. As these symbolic patterns expanded, the boundary between inner experience and external reality grew more fluid, guiding early humans toward a new way of understanding existence. Their minds were now capable of building bridges between what they saw and what they sensed, shaping the earliest forms of belief that would soon influence the emergence of guides, rituals, and deeper spiritual practices. Before we continue, tell me in the comments what kind of early symbol you believe had the strongest impact on these ancestors. Was it a gesture, a sound, a mark, or something shaped by fire and shadow? Your thoughts help expand this journey while we explore how these evolving minds took the next step toward the first spiritual leaders. As symbolic thinking deepened within early human groups, something new began to emerge in the social structure itself. Not everyone interpreted the world in the same way. Some individuals were more attentive to patterns, more responsive to sounds and shadows, more intuitive about danger and opportunity. These were the ones who noticed subtle changes in the environment before anyone else, who sensed meaning in the movements of animals, the shifts in weather, or the unusual silence before a storm. Their heightened sensitivity made them stand out, and little by little others began to look to them for guidance. These early observers did not see themselves as leaders, yet the group treated them as individuals who understood something hidden. Over time, these perceptive members developed a deeper connection to symbolic gestures and repeated actions. When the group hesitated at certain places, these individuals often stepped forward first, interpreting the atmosphere with a confidence that others lacked. They were not shamans or prophets, because those concepts did not yet exist, but they acted as early intermediaries between the visible world and the emotional meanings the group projected onto it. Their presence brought calm during uncertainty and direction during fear, and this reliability slowly granted them a unique social role. As firelight shaped shifting images across cave walls, these individuals were often the ones who lingered, watching the movement of shadows more intently than the rest. They noticed how shapes changed with different angles of light, how sounds echoed differently depending on the cavern's depth. Their perception allowed them to assign meaning to places and moments in ways that resonated with the group's growing symbolic mindset. Without language, they communicated through posture, rhythm, and repeated gestures, creating patterns that others followed instinctively. These patterns became anchors during tense situations, reinforcing the association between certain individuals and the unseen forces that seemed to shape their world. Their influence grew stronger as groups faced difficult challenges. During scarce seasons, when food was limited and predators shadowed their paths, the group often watched the reactions of these observant members. If they paused, everyone paused. If they advanced, the others followed. Through repetition, this dynamic solidified into an early form of spiritual authority, grounded not in ritualized belief, but in emotional trust. Their intuition appeared to bridge two worlds, the physical environment and the symbolic interpretations that shaped the group's understanding of existence. Over generations, this subtle distinction laid the groundwork for something far more complex. Individuals with heightened awareness began to represent connection, meaning, and continuity, even when nothing was formally defined. Their presence created a sense of orientation, as if they carried glimpses of the invisible patterns that early humans felt but could not yet describe. This emerging role formed the spark from which future spiritual guides, storytellers, and ritual leaders would eventually grow, shaping the next steps in humanity's evolving relationship with mystery, meaning, and the unseen forces they sensed in every corner of their world. As these perceptive individuals began influencing group behavior, something even more powerful emerged. the unifying force of collective rituals. While no one consciously designed them, these shared actions grew naturally from the emotional rhythms of early human life. When danger approached, the group tightened formation in a familiar pattern. When they gathered around a carcass or a fire, their bodies instinctively synchronized in posture and movement. These repeated sequences created a kind of unspoken choreography, shaping the first communal expressions that resembled early ritual practice. Without realizing it, early humans were discovering that shared gestures could produce a powerful sense of belonging. The emotional impact of these collective patterns was profound. A single individual performing a gesture might feel curiosity or tension, but when the entire group mirrored that gesture, the emotional response intensified. The synchronized movements reinforced the idea that they were part of something larger than themselves, something capable of facing the uncertainty of the natural world. The repetition of actions, sounds, or positions strengthened social cohesion and reduced fear, creating a shared mental space where meaning could expand. These moments allowed the group to experience a unity that extended beyond simple cooperation for survival. Fire played a central role in shaping these early communal practices. As groups sat around flames, their faces illuminated and shadows stretching across cave walls, their movements tended to align unconsciously. The rhythm of breathing, the sway of bodies responding to heat, the soft murmurs or hums that filled the air, all contributed to a shared emotional state. In this environment, early humans could feel a collective pulse, as if the group itself had a spirit shaped by their combined presence. This heightened awareness strengthened bonds and deepened the symbolic significance of gathering. Even without formal beliefs, these shared experiences created the foundation for ritual meaning. A specific location, like the entrance of a cave or the base of a cliff, became associated with repeated group actions. Returning to these places reinforced emotional memory, giving them an aura that felt distinct from ordinary spaces. When the group imitated a gesture that had been used in moments of danger or transition, the act carried a weight that went beyond its physical motion. Over time, these gestures became markers of identity and continuity, linking individuals across generations through patterns that felt timeless. The more early humans engaged in this communal synchrony, the more their symbolic thinking expanded. The group became a canvas on which emotion, imagination, and shared experience painted meaning. Rituals strengthened unity in ways that instinct alone could not achieve, allowing early humans to experience the world not just as individuals, but as a collective mind responding to forces that shaped their existence. Through these shared actions, they moved closer to creating structured spiritual practices, setting the stage for the transformative shift that would soon redefine the role of belief in their evolving societies. As collective rituals strengthened the sense of unity within early human groups, something even deeper began to unfold beneath the surface of their evolving minds. The shared emotional experiences, the synchronized movements, and the symbolic patterns passed from one generation to the next slowly transformed spirituality into a force that shaped identity itself. For the first time, early humans were not simply reacting to their environment, but interpreting it through an internal world filled with meaning, memory, and a growing awareness of unseen connections. This shift allowed them to imagine invisible forces guiding their existence, creating the earliest foundations of belief long before organized religions emerged. Over time, these beliefs influenced how groups navigated their daily lives. A familiar gesture repeated before a hunt created confidence. A particular arrangement of stones offered comfort during scarcity. A return to a meaningful place strengthened bonds between individuals who shared its emotional weight. These patterns formed an early map of understanding, helping them make sense of events that might have otherwise overwhelmed them. The world no longer felt chaotic. It became a landscape filled with signals they believed they could interpret. This sense of orientation gave their lives structure, offering continuity in a world marked by constant danger and change. As their minds expanded, early humans began weaving stories from these experiences. A shadow that moved unexpectedly became a presence. A strange sound in the night held intention. A pattern in the stars suggested a message. These interpretations were not random. They were the natural extension of symbolic thinking, shaped by countless generations, learning to see meaning in every corner of existence. Through these evolving narratives, early humans strengthened their connection with one another, passing on lessons, warnings, and hopes through memory long before language could articulate them fully. The growing complexity of their spiritual sense marked a pivotal step in human evolution. It influenced cooperation, decision-making, and group identity. It shaped social roles, values, and emotional bonds. And perhaps most importantly, it allowed early humans to face uncertainty with a shared sense of purpose. Even without understanding it, spirituality became one of the forces that held their societies together, guiding them through the mysteries of life, death, and the vast natural world that surrounded them. If you stayed with me until now, let me know in the comments by writing a simple phrase like, "I am here until the end." It is always interesting to see who walks through this entire exploration. And if this journey through the origins of spirituality added something meaningful to you, consider subscribing to the channel so you can continue exploring these stories with me. A like on the video also helps keep this type of content alive for more people who are curious about our deepest roots. There is another video right here that connects with what we explored today, so feel free to click and continue this path with me as we dive even further into the mysteries that shaped early humanity.